The first 5 chapters of the book of Psalms are fascinating. And when I speak about 5, we see here in chapter 5 or chapter 2, the first 5 verses. Now, the first 5 verses of Psalms are absolutely amazing. One of the verses says, and this is called, the Psalms is called the Messianic Triumph in the Kingdoms. And you ask the question, people ask me a question all the time, does God laugh? I mean, does he have emotion? Actually, he does. And he has all of our emotion. In fact, we're created in his image, but some of our emotion is not proper because of sin. But his emotion is perfect. Now, with that in mind, let me read this to you, and we'll take this one at a time. It says, "Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing?" People plot a vain thing? Yes, they do. In fact, it says, "The kings of the earth," verse 2, "set themselves." The kings of the earth set themselves, and they get ready to come against God. "And the rulers take counsel together." The kings of the earth and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. This is really interesting. This tells us about the time of the end, when all of the work that Satan has put together comes in place, and all of the kings and all of the leaders set themselves up against God. They come together against the Lord and his anointed, and they say this, "Let us break their bonds in pleas and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs." God is the one who laughs at them. Now, it's interesting that man believes he can set himself up against God. And that's true that he believes that because God doesn't seem to be around anywhere. I mean, the Lord is where? The Lord, I can feel him in my heart. I know he's here. I know his presence is with us. But as we think this through and as we understand it, we need to recognize that people come against God. Now, it's interesting how atheists say there is no God, so, there's no God. They are self-defeating argument, because you believe in something that if you don't believe in God, then technically you do believe that there's something you don't believe in. So it's a kind of a confusing thing. But these people have believed in God and set themselves against the Lord. And with that in mind, the Lord laughs. It says here, "The Lord shall hold them in derision." That's interesting, by the way. "Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure." I want to tell you something. There are ways that we can talk to God. There are ways that we can speak to him. And when God speaks back to us in his deep displeasure, that's not a good thing. That's a very, very distressing thing. And I want to tell you something. The kings of the earth and the leaders are putting themselves in a bad situation. Now, let me ask you a question. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things in the world. A lot of people saying a lot of things in the world. There's one man who believes he's a god. Well, if you're going to put yourself up against God, you better be ready, because God is going to answer. And if you're going to say you're a god, you're going to have to answer for that. As human beings, we are people who are under the Almighty God. God is stronger than we are. We are created in God's image. And that's the absolute truth. So that's something to think about when we look at the first 5 verses here in Psalms chapter 2.